Is Bryan Johnson. He's a man who likes to go all in on the things that he believes in, which is more than most of us can say for ourselves. He joined the Church of Latter-day Saints, the Mormon Church. He was a Mormon for most of his life. He went on Mormon missions of the church to which he belonged in several countries. I believe he went to Venezuela or Colombia. And in that country, he found a great deal of poverty. And he went back to the United States at 21 years old. And as he was set to join college, he promised to himself, I will become rich so that I can make the world a better place and not allow it to go through deprivation, which I have seen in these poorer countries. And so he did. He set out about his mission. He started reselling phones. Then he worked as a salesman for a credit card company. And then he created his own parallel credit card service. And his credit card service his payment service was what gave rise to Braintree Venmo, which he later sold for $800 million. And his personal payoff must have been estimated on the house of around $400 million to $500 million. So he's often cited as being a billionaire. If you get a 10% return on that much money, which you can easily get through the S&P and other conventional investments, you have $50 million in the bank each year without depleting your main stockpile. So he has money forever as long as he keeps to the minimum cap of $50 million a year, which I believe he will do. And he has a son. He has a son who lives with him. He has another son who lives with his mother. Doesn't choose to live with Bryan. But the son who lives with him, and he has posted several unconventional and controversial pictures of that son has incredible biomarkers, just like Johnson. He's on the protocol. And supposedly they go to sleep at the same time, 8:30 every day, which is very rare for a teenager. His son is 19 years old, or at least he was last year, at 19 or 20. But he doesn't follow the protocol so tightly because, he recently posted, I think last year, he posted a picture of his incredibly low heart rate, by the way. He has a 36 BPM heart rate. But he posted that, I think, at 10 p.m. He took a screenshot. The screenshot was from 9:07, and he posted it at like 10 p.m. So he's not sleeping at 8:30 p.m. He's a little closer to a normal teenager sleeping at 10. Maybe on the weekends going a little longer, which is normal. Though Bryan would probably scoff at that and say no. Also, he says that Talmadge, of course, is his best friend. My son is my best friend. He has been criticized because he has posted pictures with his son holding bags of blood because they have done plasma transfusion. That is, his son takes his plasma and gives it to Bryan. But by all metrics, his son looks exceptionally healthy. He has the best biomarkers of any person ever, basically. Almost, right? A 36 BPM heart rate, resting heart rate is incredible. Sometimes at sleep, I think he gets like 42, but sometimes he gets something like 36, which is incredibly low. It's more than an athlete level. And he gets that before the bed too, with the wind down routine or whatever. So who cares if he kind of breaks protocol a little bit? And if there was a little bit of embellishment and a little bit of lying where Bryan says, we go to sleep at the same time, we eat the same thing, we train at the same time, that's probably not quite right. He also has a heavier calorie diet than Bryan does because he's younger, he's growing, and his body's still developing. And he also needs to go to sleep a little later so he can fit in with his peers, and he needs to use his phone before bed as well, which Bryan would scoff at as well, and he doesn't recommend it. He himself doesn't do it, but of course Talmadge does it because he took a screenshot of his resting heart rate and posted it at 10 p.m. Right, so he's using his phone then. And I think that this is very controversial. It's the difference between the public persona and who you actually are. But a lot of their data is incredible, especially his HRV, which is at an athlete level, but it's largely genetic. So Bryan himself has a not so good HRV. He has admitted it himself. He's tried very hard to get his HRV to go higher. Your HRV is basically the measure of how relaxed your body is, how much of a blissful and peaceful state your body's in. And Bryan hasn't managed to get his up from, I think the maximum has been 50s or 60s. And that's just a normal person's HRV. But it's genetic, it's largely genetic. His son has gotten his HRV to like, I think he's gotten it to 190 has been the largest number, like 195 or 99. And some athletes, of course, can get their up to 250. There have been athletes who have gotten their HRV up to 250, I think almost 300. And Talmadge is almost there. He's like 197 at his best. And that's largely genetic. Meanwhile, his father cannot get it up at all. And of course, that has to do with age. HRV will go down slightly with age. But judging from Bryan's HRV, he certainly could have never gotten to 200 as his son can. And many of these metrics that we obsess over ultimately are genetic, ultimately are down to luck. But I think Bryan has done a lot to kind of publicize the idea of taking better care of your body, of kind of letting go of social convention that tells you to destroy yourself. Self-care has always been great. I mean, of course, we remember from history class that back then, the work week, you would work like 16 hours a day. That can still happen in China and other places. Factory workers, co-workers, children who work 16 hours a day. And somebody at some point understood that was very bad for your health. And so people protested very heavily for that. They went on strike for that. And ultimately, they got the 8-hour workday, which was a great accomplishment. It was supposed to be 8 hours work, 8 hours leisure, 8 hours sleep. And that was the kind of mantra, the kind of advertisement. And I think that Bryan, if nothing else, he brings more health consciousness into the minds of people. And he allows people to understand how damaged they are by the daily life that is barraged upon us, and how current social conventions are perhaps inadequate to preserve our health. Certainly, they are inadequate to preserve our fertility, which Bryan doesn't talk too much about. Breeding, having children, reproducing. Doesn't talk too much about that. He is a little more conservative on that front. He just wants to preserve his body. He doesn't want to make more of him at this point. And then he does have children, 2 children. So that's good enough, I suppose. He has reproduced to a great extent. And he cannot do it any further. I think he's almost 50 now. And so he will not do it any further. But the fertility crisis as well as the self-care crisis are both crises that are hitting us in this century. Of course, probably much more than any health protocol that Bryan can advance, the thing that will help us most are chemicals, which are also the things that hurt us to a certain extent. Super palatable food will only be defeated by Ozempic and by GLP-1s and things that chemically reduce your satiety. It won't be psychological for most people. Although Bryan's work, I think, as I said, entering into the consciousness of people that they should kind of fight for those rights to health is something that is worthwhile, certainly. And using AI to aid human health, to aid human alignment rather than fight against it, is also something that we could benefit from. So ultimately, I think that Bryan's very controversial. A lot of the stuff he does, it's not for everyone. Certainly, we don't know about the effectiveness of his protocol, or how much of it is down to genetics and luck, which we can suspect is probably a lot of it. The person who lived the most in the world documented was a woman who lived up to 122 years old. And among the centenarians, a large majority are women. And among the ones who lived the most is women. And they often didn't have exceptionally great health protocols. They're just low stress people, chill people who had great genetic advantage and great luck. And that's probably what determines longevity more than any protocol that Bryan can advance. But along large populations, I think he certainly will move the baseline for human quality of life much further. And if we can follow it, and if we can fight for better rights for ourselves, for better rights to our life and our health and our longevity, I think that we should do it. And to the extent that he contributes to that, I think that he does positive work. So this has been Who is Bryan Johnson? I hope you enjoyed the podcast and hope that you subscribe, leave a like, and I'll be very happy to see you next time here. Take it easy, peace, and have a blessed day.